From Vermont's most trusted news source, WCAX brings you your newsmakers, your neighbors. This is You Can Quote Me.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Darren Perrin. Patients reaching the end of life face many choices about how they want to live their final days. We'll talk about that with our guest this morning, Lauren Bailey, a nurse practitioner at UVM Medical Center who specializes in palliative care. But first, Barb's story, a Burlington businesswoman who planned to make a choice not available in most other states, take a prescription to end her own life after an unsuccessful battle with ovarian cancer. Kristen Kelly was with Barb during her final weeks.
Of course, I always ask the question, how long? And it was 3 to 5 years.
It wasn't supposed to be this way.
Going into year 3. And I really don't think I'll make the end of year 3.
Barb Bardin knew ovarian cancer was going to kill her. How soon was the question?
Whatever takes the pain away.
When the Burlington business owner invited us to follow her through the end of her life, she had thought she had a few months to live. But suddenly the time frame was cut to weeks. She rushed to UVM Medical Center on April 1st.
Just couldn't breathe. So obviously I can't keep anything down. And it's just more of the symptoms of getting closer to what's coming.
What's coming is what the 63-year-old fought since her diagnosis, with surgery and several rounds of chemo. But the prognosis for stage 3 ovarian cancer patients is not good, and Barb's cancer had advanced.
I tell patients with stage 3 ovarian cancer that they are treatable but not curable.
Dr. Chung Wong is director of gynecologic oncology at UVM Medical Center. He says the symptoms that first led to Barb's diagnosis are classic and frustratingly vague. Feeling bloated, feeling pelvic pressure, only eating a little but feeling full. Some women have urinary symptoms. Dr. Wong says about 80% of patients are first diagnosed already at stage 3, meaning the cancer spread out of the ovaries and into the abdomen. Just 45% of women survive 5 years past diagnosis. It is the 5th most deadly cancer for women, killing about 14,000 in the U.S. each year.
I'm glad you're here.
Of course.
For Barb, chemo offered hope at first. But the cancer kept coming back and she stopped. Now she gets sick every time she eats or drinks, despite being hungry and thirsty. And there's a lot of pain from fluid building up in her midsection.
So how is your nausea right now?
It's fine. She gave me some meds.
Dr. Wong ordered a CAT scan to see how the cancer had grown. How much time is left?
I was pushing and asking, what does this mean? Is this truly the beginning?
Yeah.
That's what they see.
Barb had already been planning for her death. A stay in the hospital this winter convinced her.
I have my trust in order. I had my little ashes box made and got my party planned.
A post-death celebration. And she arrived at the hospital this time making progress on another plan to end her own life, work she started during that earlier stay with questions for the hospital's palliative care team.
Last we met, you were getting some information about using physician aid in dying.
Barb had decided to take a lethal dose of medication when the time seemed right.
But just to be able to have the opportunity to make the decision yourself.
And that doesn't scare you?
Oh, it certainly does. But I have to be brave about it. I mean, I don't really have a lot of options. This is a good option.
2 years ago, Act 39 made it legal for terminally ill Vermont residents to get a prescription. Dr. Wong had already signed off, agreeing Barb was within 6 months of death and that she was of sound mind. Barb had filled out a written request signed by 2 witnesses agreeing her choice is voluntary. Under law, she cannot have help taking the medication. But the law also requires an independent consultation with a second doctor at least 15 days after the first. She's supposed to go to his office the next day. Now she hopes he can make a house call to the hospital.
But in this situation, I want to take care of myself and just be with my fam. And my dear sweet brother, this is the hardest, the biggest challenge I've ever had to face.
The next day,
You got to carry on.
friends are gathering, and Barb is working on her obituary.
How I love you all.
The scan found cancer is covering her intestines. That's what's preventing her from keeping food or water down. And doctors say that and the fluid buildup will only get worse.
And it is very Barb to want to be in control or take control of herself.
Barb built her career on being in charge and helping people have a good time. She owned the catering company Let's Pretend, arranging lavish spreads, creative themes, or just political ones.
When the sun is out, we're styling.
She sold that business after launching another 12 years ago, the restaurant Splash at the Burlington Boathouse.
For somebody who was so full of life, and here we are.
Talking about how she wants to say goodbye.
When you're in rough shape and you have no recourse and you know you're going to go, why not go on top?
That was the plan. Physically, she was in a downward spiral, but she still didn't have the prescription, and she worried about Montpelier.
That's why I want to get my hot little paws on it before the legislature changes anything.
Medication to be self-administered.
This session, lawmakers were weighing whether to let some patient protections in Act 39 expire or take action to essentially maintain the law as is.
What hope is there that all at-risk Vermonters will be protected?
But opponents wanted to revisit the law in its entirety, raising concerns about vulnerable patients potentially getting pushed into taking their own lives and about the lack of data that's tracked by the state. The health department only knows that 11 patients have gotten approval for lethal prescriptions over the last 2 years, not whether they've actually taken the meds or what happened to the pills if they chose not to use them. Anecdotally, people involved in end-of-life care believe 4 people have died using Act 39.
The only purpose of this law to ending someone's death, to not know any of the circumstances of that death, is frightening.
Here we go.
But lawmakers voted to keep Act 39 as an option for patients.
So it does give them control, and she can say enough is enough.
Dr. Wong is used to tough conversations with patients and working with them through end-stage cancer. But Barb was his first patient to ask him about Act 39.
It does surprise me because I think that there are a lot of patients who think about it, and a lot of patients who actually will make comments that, well, you know, if I'm going to go, I would just use X or Y. I think that this story and Barb's story actually will bring this to light, and maybe this topic will be less tabooed. In part, it's our fault also as physicians because many of us may not feel comfortable talking about it because you're right, we are told we need to treat the patient. But death and dying is a part of life.
So it sounds like the weekend wasn't so great.
No, not at all. Nope. Having a real hard time.
6 days into her hospital stay, Barb's symptoms have gone from bad to better to much, much worse. It's a common collision of advancing cancer, painkillers, anti-nausea meds, and their side effects. For her care team, it's a complex balancing act, and for Barb, it's a rough ride.
I'm suffering. I've got to go. I want to go. I can't live like this. It's just, I look at the clock and I go, another day of what? Being absolutely miserable and in pain. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be this.
That second doctor gave Barb the lethal prescription. Her brother Dave found a single pharmacy in the state able to fill it, and he paid $5,000 for the pills. Vermont law requires private insurance to cover end-of-life medication like other drugs on your plan. But Barb needs to get home to take the capsules. No hospital or hospice care facility in the state allows patients to use Act 39 on site. And the dose of barbiturates prescribed is so large she must take 100 capsules. She says even if she mixed the powder inside them with liquid, she couldn't keep it down. For weeks, Barb has not been able to eat or drink without vomiting.
I mean, I go to have a bit of water, and I just can't keep it down. Nothing. And what am I going to do, starve to death?
Barb resisted at first, but then agreed to a procedure to drain fluid from her abdomen. It could provide pain and nausea relief for a while.
She's at a crossroads because she may believe that she may not have a choice to act upon her plan.
The hope is it works and buys her time to go home.
It's something I feel strongly about sharing.
Barb Bardin is in the last weeks of a 3-year fight with ovarian cancer. It is early April and the 63-year-old is getting fluid drained from her midsection, a procedure she resisted, but Barb hopes it eases the increasing pain and nausea that sent her to UVM Medical Center the week before. She wants to be able to go home to die.
The cancer is taking me over, and it's the anguish is just so powerful.
Barb already worked through the forms and doctor consultations required by Vermont's Act 39 and has a lethal dose of medication to end her life. But she cannot be in the hospital when she takes the prescription and worries she won't be able to keep it down, even with anti-nausea meds.
How am I going to do that?
The relief is almost instantaneous. 12 pounds of fluid siphoned from her abdomen. Fluid, her doctor says, is likely caused by leaky blood vessels fueled by proteins in her cancer.
I feel like I could do the city marathon. Like a gazelle.
Her plan is to go home within a day or so.
If your goal is to get home,
the hospital's palliative care team has been working with Barb throughout to help manage her symptoms.
Do we think we can make them better?
And make her plans.
Quality of life and living.
Palliative care practitioners help patients cope with any serious condition, be it a stroke, car crash, or terminal diagnosis like Barb's.
We help people when they're trying to navigate through this because it is not a straight line. There are lots of things. There's different options that are presented to them. Treatments are presented, taken, can cause side effects. So it is just this kind of moving target.
It's an approach focusing on the whole person, not just the cancer patient.
The mind is kind of often the last thing to catch up, right? The body's doing one thing, but the mind is going, wait a minute, I'm not prepared to die. I don't want to die. I'm not ready to die. It's not my time.
Barb is not wasting any time. Her home is ready with round-the-clock VNA hospice care set up for her arrival.
Hi, baby. Hey, baby.
Oh. And she's saying goodbye.
Means a lot to me. Means a ton.
Dozens of friends know time is running out.
Make sure you get yourself checked out there, sweetie. Don't let any rumblings in your tummy go undetected. Serious business, this ovarian cancer stuff.
Barb's been bracing for her farewell since her diagnosis. The restaurant owner and party planner has been ticking items off her bucket list, including a luxurious vacation in Italy with a big group of friends.
It was wonderful. We were going to try to make one more trip to Italy. That will just be in our minds now.
Preparation helps, but does not make some decisions less daunting.
Looks good.
The fluid draining procedure gave some relief, but Barb's nausea was stubborn. She did not go home the next day, or the next, or the next. As her condition declined, working with the palliative care team and her loved ones, Barb changed her plan.
What I had gotten from her is when I feel well, I don't want to die. When I feel sick, I'm too sick to take the medication.
She was not going home and no longer planned to end her own life.
In my situation now, Kristen, I don't want to miss a beat.
I don't want to miss something that could be very vital to my passing in a genteel way.
Too fearful about trying to keep down the lethal dose that under law she must take herself, or manage constantly changing pain and nausea at home, even with round-the-clock nurses, Barb decided on hospice care at the Vermont Respite House in Williston.
I still believe in Act 39. It's not that I have changed my mind about that piece, because I haven't. Things have changed a bit. I have a clearer understanding of my time frame and how it's all going to come together.
They were so terrific.
Barb knew she was never going to see her home again.
Bye, Milner.
Barb's brother Dave had toured the respite house in advance.
I was just hoping that it would be acceptable to her, knowing she wanted to come home.
Part of the Vermont Respite House mission is to make the 13 patients and their loved ones as comfortable as possible. Patients are called residents, and the facility is called their home.
To have it be home-like is just a feeling that, okay, this is a transition I'm making, but it's not so stark of being in a very clinical environment.
Helping to create that warmer feeling, a living room, kitchen, and smells of baking. Volunteers keep the place filled with treats and good cheer.
Hospice is about living, and so the environment that you're living in is very important.
This is not an institution. It's home. I got that immediately.
Barb settled in quickly.
Honey, thank you. Thank you. I'll be back.
And began what respite house staff call the work of saying goodbye.
The ambulance ride over here was, I was looking at the cars behind me and the scenery, thinking, I took all this for granted. This is another stage of life that is just so different.
How?
I won't be doing those things ever again. I won't have that independence. I won't be able to take advantage of driving my car and putting the top down on those sunny days and just thinking, oh, this is the cat's ass. Now I'm looking at a very serious reality, and that's death. And until that comes about, I just have to live with as much grace as I can possibly muster up.
Residents here have been as young as 16 and as old as 104. They lose independence as their bodies shut down. Caregivers say each person handles that differently, but they do see some of the same behaviors over and over.
The circle of people that they interact with becomes smaller and smaller and smaller as they require more and more energy to do the internal work at the end of life that they need to accomplish of saying goodbye.
And what is this internal work?
Well, I think a lot of it is coming to peace with what's happening.
The staff is trained to help patients work through their grief along with easing their symptoms. And there are family supports like social workers because the loss hits loved ones too.
Hard, very hard, very hard. And I think it is for anyone that goes through this process.
Despite all the expertise, most Vermonters are not choosing hospice care like this at the end of life. The national average is 47%, while Vermont is just over 32%, one of the lowest rates in the country. The VNA is running a study to find out why. For more than 2 weeks, Barb's family and friends camped out, and she closed her circles smaller and smaller too.
I just gotta go. This is too much.
The progression of her illness is taking hold. What she's feeling is she's ready to go.
A few days after this, Barb slipped into a coma and passed away. It was April 26th. Her brother Dave still by her side.
It was hard to see her like that.
Barb's death was not the one she originally planned. Up until the end, she called her lethal prescription her security blanket.
She wanted that tool in her toolbox, as she would say.
But she never left the respite house to use it.
I don't know when you pull that trigger. You know, you pull that trigger when you're able to pull that trigger, but you're not ready to pull that trigger.
When she left, was it what she wanted?
I think it was as best as it could possibly be.
A couple of months after she passed, the professional party planner's last event at one of her favorite spots in Burlington.
It's tough because we all miss her, but we feel like this is what she wants.
Barb had organized every detail.
Her fingerprints are all over this.
The food, the flowers, the free-flowing Veuve Clicquot, Barb's favorite champagne.
It's just overwhelming, and to hear the corks popping, it just is like, yeah, Barb is really here.
One last thank you to her family and friends.
Kristen joins me next, along with our guest, Lauren Bailey. Don't go away. And welcome back, everyone. We are talking about end-of-life choices this morning. Lauren Bailey, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Kristen is joining the conversation as well. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for being here, Lauren. You talked about in the piece how the mind, when terminally ill patients are really facing the very end of their lives, the mind can sometimes be the last thing to catch up, and you've had a lot of these conversations with your patients. How do you approach that? It is such a tough subject.
The ideal opportunity is that we have time with a patient. So either they've had I work fully inpatient, so at UVM Medical Center. So if they've had multiple admissions or they're going to be there for a while, and we meet them early, because you get a little bit more time for the person to know that you're really there to find out what's important to them. And so that's the number one way to approach the conversation. What's important to you? If we know you're in the final phase of your life, how do you want to live that life? And so by building trust and hearing what's important to patients, then you can keep peeling away the layers and having deeper conversations about, you know, now we're getting down to time is getting shorter or these things. It just helps them move along. Sometimes the moving moves faster or slower. Everybody does it differently. So really it's relationship building, pulling back the layers, finding out what's important, and having the conversations.
And providing information too, right? Because doesn't that help them kind of work through what's going on?
Yes, we always ask the primary team following a patient. We often get called for a goals of care conversation. It's our number one reason for a consult. And we ask, what have you told the patient? What do they know what their prognosis is, their prognosis is? And so we start by, they say, oh yeah, we told them. We always start our conversations with, tell me what you've heard from your team. That helps set the stage for, they have no idea what they're facing, or they have a pretty good handle. They can repeat back what the team, has told us they said, and then you can either move forward or say to the team, they need more information. Because if they can't clearly identify what is wrong with them and what they might be facing, then it's really hard to move a conversation forward.
This has to be difficult work.
People say that to me all the time. My background is as a hospice nurse, and now I do this. And there's lots of challenges in every field of healthcare. So for me, I just think it's a privilege to really be able to care for people who are at their most vulnerable time in life. Not everybody's facing the end of their life that I care for. So I think it's harder for sort of society looking in than it is for people who are doing palliative care. Yeah.
Let me ask you a little bit about who has access to what. Barb, obviously a successful businesswoman here in Burlington, and she ended, her life at respite house. Is that available to everyone, anyone of any income level?
Yeah, so hospice, which Vermont Respite House is run under hospice, is a federally funded program. So it's available to anybody with health insurance. Most private insurances follow the Medicare guidelines for hospice, and hospice covers skilled nursing in the home for blips of time, not chunks of time. And then it covers medications or equipment that would be required to keep somebody comfortable related to their terminal diagnosis. Vermont Respite House, and I'm not an employee there, so I don't want to speak so much on their what they do. But my understanding is that they, the room and board is a fee, but they work on a sliding scale fee. So I've seen all different people go there with all different pay scales or no pay scales and be able to go there and get wonderful end-of-life care. We often recommend families to call them or go make a visit, and then they get how their financial breakup would be.
Any idea why the rates are so low in which people are participating in that? Do you think it's just a lack of knowledge about this, or what do you think?
Well, in my experience, I think a lot of it has to do is that people don't want to admit that they're dying, and if they say they're hospice, then they have come to some other term with the acceptance of dying. But I'm sure that there are some other logistics that go into that. But that is people say, oh no, not hospice. Even if I walk in the room and I say I'm palliative care, oh no, that's hospice, and you have to separate them both. So people are afraid of what that means, even if it means they're actually really, in the last 6 months of their life.
Has doing this kind of work changed how you live your life?
I would say so. I always sort of preface that with, of course, I can still get frustrated at my house being dirty or somebody cutting me off in traffic, but it does help me take pause, and life is very short, and you need to make sure you live every day and not take for granted the things that are available to you, because anybody at any age can have a life-changing event.
Lauren Bailey, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Kristen, thank you. Excellent work. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you soon. Have a good day.